The Lord be with you. Proclamation of the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take you to court, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to anyone who begs from you, and don't refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous as well as the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
If you ever have trouble sleeping at night, pick up the book of Leviticus. Believe me, because if you pick up that book, all you will find are a lot of rules, regulations, laws. And as you know, the Jews observe what? 613 laws and rules. But the whole purpose of the book of Leviticus is an invitation to holiness. That's what you have to remember. It's an invitation to holiness. And Pope Francis gave us a marvelous exhortation on that whole subject. An invitation to holiness. And he's trying to get across to us that that applies to all of us, no matter who we are. It applies to every single one of us, that we are invited to holiness. And of course, what you find in the book of Leviticus are the 10 Commandments, and you also find there it is brought out, as is brought out in the first reading today, that we are to love God, that we are to love others, as we love ourselves. And Jesus, of course, fulfilled all that. In fact, he went beyond that. He gave us a tremendous challenge in the gospel today, because he was reciting there the lex talionis, the law of retribution, where there is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And that's how they lived at that particular time. Can you imagine if that would happen today? As Dr. Martin Luther King would say, there would be a lot of blind people and a lot of toothless people. But Jesus says, no, love one another. Love your enemies. And sometimes people say, well, I don't have any enemies. And I say, oh, is that right? Well, how do you get along with your neighbor? How do you get along with your spouse? How do you get along with your children? Good questions, right? But the ability to be able to say, yes, I have to do that. Recently I read David Brooks' latest book, and it's entitled The Second Mountain. And in that particular book, he points out how he experienced a lot of enemies when he was invited by New York Times to be their reporter. But he said, at that time, I'm not going to allow those individuals to have me return their unkindness. And as a result of that, he went through a whole conversion process. He converted from Judaism to Catholicism. Why? Because he was able to show that love that Jesus invites us to show. And Jesus went on to say, so if someone strikes you on the right cheek, then offer him the left cheek. The only way I can strike you on your right cheek is how? With the back of my hand. And that was a worse insult to the Jews, to strike someone that way. And I was trying to explain this one time to a group of 7th and 8th graders. And there was a boy sitting up front. I said to him, well, if somebody hit you, what would you do? And I was hoping the boy would say, I'd hit him back. And the boy said, I'd run. That took care of that explanation. And then Jesus gives us even something far more difficult, far more challenging maybe for some of us. And that is the ability to be able to pray for individuals whom you dislike, who you can't stand. I hear that often from individuals. I can't stand her. I can't stand him. So, oh, is that right? But the ability to be able to get to that particular point in one's life, I think, is very, very challenging. So, when you look at what it means to be a Christian, to be a Catholic today, I think if you really live out this gospel, that's very challenging. Don't you agree?
Yes.